I would agree with the congressman. Our immigration system is broken. It's been broken for years over the course of more than the Obama presidency. And what we hear from Washington is no. Regardless of whose idea is filtering up, it's a no. They can't move it forward. And for anyone to say that what was going on the southern border isn't a crisis, right? But if you own it as a crisis, then you have to fix it. So we had people on either side being quite loud about it and nothing moving forward through the middle. It brings me back to the question of a 16-day shutdown, right? I mean, a lot of these issues we're going to hit on makes me wonder why we closed our government down for 60 days and didn't do any work, right? It's certainly not for lack of crises facing us every day. So, immigration. We have underemployment here. We have unemployment problem here, right? The more folks that come in, the lower wages are driven for the Americans that want to do the jobs, and the harder it is for Americans to find the jobs. So to not address immigration on an economic and jobs issue is kind of missing the question, right? The more folks that come in that are willing to work for lower wages, the harder it is for us to rebuild the American dream. So we have to have the conversation. We have to talk about the kids that came in, right? And if you look at the beginning of the century, a lot of kids showed up at Ellis Island unaccompanied. We did not turn them back. We did not turn them back. Now, I am not saying we open the door to every child, but we certainly can't put them back on a bus, right? When they're 2 years old, you can't put a 2-year-old back in a bus with no one to take them. So we have to practice the compassion that we are as Americans and make sure that we can get them home if that's the right outcome with accompaniments, firstly. You know, ag is a huge industry, and yes, we have migrant farm workers that fill a void for a lot of large farms that need workers. But again, we come back to the question, Americans need work too. So should we be having a conversation about how we fill those jobs with Americans, but that requires us to talk about wages, right? It requires us to talk about minimum wage, and it requires us to talk about making sure employers are only hiring people that are legally here. That's a conversation a lot of people don't want to have either, because these really huge businesses benefit when they can hire people and pay them off the books, right? I mean, we just have to be honest about what's happening here. So in order to address the immigration problem, we have to talk to employers about making sure that folks are here and working, are doing so legally, and if they're not, then the employers face consequences. We also have to talk about what we're going to do on the southern border and these kids that are coming in. But most importantly, our Congress has to talk about it, as opposed to posing two bills that have nothing in common, and then being really loud and angry that we can't find a space in the middle. So I look forward to having that conversation, because I know, while our constituency here is, we don't have a huge minority population here, across the nation we do. Thank you. We'll get this right by the end, you know that.
Okay, we're going to move on to health care. Some people in government believe that you have to pass the bill to find out what is in it. We, the voters of the 5th District, feel that to vote before reading the bill is congressional malpractice. Assuming you feel the same way, could we expect your resignation if it is known that you voted for a bill without reading it?
As an attorney, I don't put my name on anything I haven't read from tip to toe. Right? So I absolutely agree with you. A conversation I've been having with a number of folks that are running for office across parties and independents and some Republicans signed on to a pledge by a group called Beating Smith. And one of the elements was that we would support legislation that would allow every bill to sit for a week online. A week. So that everybody gets to read it, right? And we don't get surprised later after a bill comes in and people say, oops, I didn't know that was in that. The Affordable Care Act is an excellent example. I think it was huge. And it wasn't read, and it was passed. And that bill is not perfect. That bill was far from perfect. There are things about it that I'm thankful that we now have, right? Folks with pre-existing conditions can now get insurance. Women can now get woman care for no cost sharing. So there are good things about it, but there are some really awful things about it too. That if it had been negotiated really hard, right, like bills should be in Congress, all the low-hanging fruit would have fallen off. So For me personally, yes, I will be reading every bill and know what it means. And further, I believe that we should be pushing out to our constituency what they mean, right? When I go online and I open a bill, it's the bill. I mean, all of it. So unless I'm going to sit down and read 4,000 pages, which, depending on the bill, I do, there should be, this is what it means, and not in a, I want to sell it to you kind of way, right? This is my party's version of what it means, or theirs. It should read like a court brief, right? When I write a brief to my court, I have to show the good stuff and the ugly stuff, and then argue why my case should win, right? That's what I've been trained to do. That's what memos should look like out to the 5th Congressional District of every bill. This is the good stuff. This is the stuff that's not so good, but this is why it's good, and this is why it isn't. And that's the approach that I'd like to take, because I can't imagine most of you have the time to sit down and read a 4,000-page bill, parse through what it means, and then decide what you think about it, right? That should be our job to do. But I think it's crucially important that we identify the good stuff, even when it comes from someone other than the person in our party. A fellow came up to me the other day and said, "Do you think any Republicans have good ideas?" I said, "Absolutely." They said, "Are you going to vote for them if they come up?" "Yes!" And then he said, "You know that's going to make your life really hard in caucus." I said, "Yeah, I'm all for it." Because I think that's what's missing in our government. So back to the question, yes, emphatically yes, to which, if you can't read it, you're too busy, and you shouldn't be there. So, thank you.
Excellent question. Let me just do a little clarification on the last question. Ellis Island is the front door, not the back door, where you come in legally. Whether you come in on a company or a company, it's the front door, it is legal. And wages on farms are not minimum wage. It's hard work, really hard work, but it's good family-sustaining wages. And it's not big farms. Our average dairy herd is 86 head, and most of our dairy farms are using what we hope are legal immigrants, legal workers, temporary workers here. They do the farms do the best to tell that. In terms of reading the bill, absolutely. Affordable Care Act, 3,000, first version was a little over 2,000 pages. It was extended over 3,000 pages the 2 times it came to us. And did I read it? Yeah, you betcha. Maybe it was the only member of Congress, but I came out of healthcare. Much of it's written in terms of the Social Security Act. The Social Security Act language is not easy to follow. Now, I have to tell you, I did not get a chance to read approximately 30,000 pages of regulations and pre-existing law that bill went back to. It was a nightmare. No one could do that, especially in the less than a week that we had to do it. And we did pass a rule under the first time under the Republican majority that bills are posted online, because it is important that you see them, you comment them, and we have a conversation, a discussion on it. I represent you, and I want you to understand and look at what we're voting on. That's why I work so hard to go around the congressional district. So much time that I spend in all 16 counties. My car's going to be paid off in January, I hope. And it's rolled over 226,000 miles, most of it serving the congressional district. In terms of there are some things with the Affordable Care Act that are very good. People with pre-existing conditions, if you've got breast cancer, prostate cancer, you should be able to have access to personal affordable insurance. But have you seen how the Obamacare addresses it? It's a big pot of money out of Washington that they didn't provide enough money for. There are other better ways to do that. There are setting up high-risk pools in each state, and the state contributes, and the federal government contributes, and the people needing insurance can purchase at affordable rates. That's a good thing. That's a very good thing. Preventative care, you know what, that one's, I came out of healthcare for 30 years. We recognized that 10, 15 years ago. Medicare provides preventative services now. Most health insurances, period, will provide preventive services because it's cheaper to prevent a disease than treat it. And so I appreciate the preventative parts of the Affordable Care Act. I'm just saying health insurance was moving that direction. But there are parts of this, as I read this mega bill, that just scared the death out of me. Because I saw, based on my 30 years of delivering health care to individuals facing life-changing disease and disability, where costs were going to go up, where access was going to go down. You know, we're going to drive medical manufacturers out of this country because we always take the best pride in the quality of what we have here. And that consumers are going to lose choice. And that always happens.
Thank you. We're going to move back to foreign affairs. In your opinion, should the U.S. support the Syrian government, ISIS, the Kurds, or remain neutral?
Well, we don't have a choice in terms of, what's tough to sort out is who you support. We're not supporting ISIS, I can tell you that. ISIS is a huge threat. There's about 20,000 fighters in Syria, 20,000 in Iraq. Of those 15,000 are foreign fighters with Western passports. That means they can come in the front door to the United States of America to do all kinds of terrible things. There's at least 100 Americans with American passports that can come back to this country, and some of them have come back. You know what the Obama administration has done? You think that if you're fighting with somebody who's cut off the heads of 2 Americans and multiple other people, including 1 woman, you think you would detain him, that that's grounds for treason. The Obama administration is tracking them. You have to ask yourself, tracking them until when? Until they cut somebody's head off, and then they'll detain them? Now here, I supported giving the President Title 10 authority, that's monies to help with training of Arab fighters. I think this probably is a holy war, but we don't want to perpetuate it as such. So I believe that the Air Force can't win this alone. Trust me, the Air Force are great people, but you need boots on the ground. This is their backyard. Arab fighters need to be boots on the ground, and that's why I've supported training the United States, working with other countries, including Saudi Arabia and Jordan and many others in that region, to train foreign fighters, to train Arab soldiers so they can be the boots on the ground. Syria is a tough situation. I know the question is around that. I think that the folks that we're supporting for the most part are freedom fighters in Syria. And it makes it very difficult because ISIS is fighting them, and also ISIS is fighting the Syrian government at this point. It would behoove that area, because of the threat that ISIS is, if those fractions in Syria would get their act together, that the Syrian president would bring their people together. Because this is not new. The Islamic State, ISIS, goes back to 608, long before 600 AD. They were pushed out of that area, 600 AD, by the Ottoman Empire. And these folks that have a memory hold a grudge. And they've had training videos. They have videos that talk about how they will not be satisfied until they fly the black flag of the Islamic State over the White House. And so that's why I'm very, very proud of, very willing to provide our president's support. I do think the president needs to have a new authorization of use of military force under the War Powers Act. And I'm insisting that he ask Congress to get that approval. And if he's claiming he doesn't need that approval, I don't think that's true, because, quite frankly, the 8.5 he's working on was for Iraq, it wasn't for Syria. I think the rule is very clear, and I think it is important that you stay within the lines of the Constitution, within the existing laws. And so I'm, as the dad of quite frankly, a wounded warrior that served in Iraq, I think this is the right thing to do.
Repeating the question, should the U.S. support the Syrian government, ISIS, the Kurds, or remain neutral?
Clearly not the Syrian government, clearly not ISIS. The Kurds have a lot of issues that are going on with the border with Turkey, right? So the Mideast is big, strange political bedfellows, to say the least. I'd like to take us back about 18 months. So if we all recall when we learned of the chemical genocide that was happening in Syria, right? The government was gassing their own people, and we knew. And we had evidence, and we went to our allies around the world and said, will you help us do something about this? And I remember it stuck in my mind very, very clearly that the result from the parliament in Britain was, you led us down that garden path once, we're not following you again. So because of what had happened with Iraq, right, because of what had happened with the weapons of mass destruction that they couldn't find, and now we're hearing rumor that they might have found, right, but we know where we went with that war. We had a world that wasn't willing to do anything about it. And when I watched the president's statement, asking Congress for permission to do something about ISIS this time, I immediately went back and watched the first speech. And the first speech was very similar. But after the first speech, in reaction to the genocide, Congress, both parties, said no. Emphatically no, no, no. They had a weekend to think about it. So the president was left to work diplomacy and try to get rid of the weapons master structure, the chemical weapons and so on. So you flash forward 18 months, and we have these two horrific beheadings right around September 11th, and the president comes and asks for permission to do something about it. And it was almost unanimous. Yes, absolutely. Personally, I believe that 18-month window, a vacuum was created in Syria that gave ISIS the space to function. And if we had been paying attention, and I'm putting the blame on everybody, this is not a Democrat-Republican thing, if we'd been paying attention, we might not be in the space that we're in, because ISIS is a universal threat. ISIS is a threat to Syria, who is not our friend, right? If you think about this, ISIS is a threat to Turkey, to the UAE, to the entire Middle East. I am most appreciative at this point that it is not our effort alone. When the UAE joins you in airstrikes against a neighbor, right, there's something happening there. People are stepping forward. And training is crucial because I don't want our boots there, right? We have some of our young men and women that are there training and providing assistance. But this is a situation that needs to be addressed regionally. And I'm thankful and appreciative that our efforts of diplomacy are bringing people into this fight and they're not looking to us to solve it all. Because to be brutally honest, no matter what we do, if we did it alone, someone would blame us later, right? Those Americans meddling in the Middle East, we hear this all the time. So the fact that a coalition is building with folks that we don't usually build coalitions with to fight this evil is the way forward. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to go back to the Constitution for the next question.
Okay.
If your party leadership offered you to give our 5th district several $1 million for a project we needed, provided that you vote for another bill they wanted, would you be willing to do that for the 5th district?
What's the other bill? Right? What's the other bill? Is the other bill to shut the government down? No. Is the other bill will I spend taxpayer dollars to try to sue a president, a sitting president, regardless of party? No. Is the other bill to try to take away something that provides health insurance to over 300,000 people in Pennsylvania? No. Is it a good bill? If the other bill establishes and makes sure that every American has the right to vote without having to defend their right when they go to the ballot box? Yep. If the other bill is an immigration bill that finally addresses border security? Yeah, I would do that too. You know, going to Congress is certainly about negotiation and compromise, but the nicest thing about how we've been able to run this race is we're not beholden to anybody, not a soul, and certainly not the Democratic Party, right? I mean, we've got a lot of people in the room tonight, and I thank you all for being here, but we've been very fortunate to run sponsored by folks that give me $5 or $10 or $25 to say, well, you just go and fix it, right? When you go do something, keep it open, tell us what you're going to do, and do the right thing when it presents itself to you. So I'm not beholden to anybody. I don't have corporate backers that want me to pass legislation that makes them more money. I don't have corporate backers that want me to undo an entire industry or give them tax breaks so that companies like GE don't pay $1 in federal income tax, right? I don't have money coming from Wall Street that's going to encourage me to not want to regulate the industry that almost caused our entire economy to go poof. So I'm lucky, I'm fortunate. I just get to go. Hopefully make my father very proud, because he told me if I sell out, I'm disowned. So, you know, when you have a 72-year-old fellow who says that and he means it, I'm lucky. So my intentions are to go and do the good work and evaluate the bills and see how they impact the folks in the 5th Congressional District, and most importantly, figure out how we can get our economy moving again, because this recession has lasted way too long. So that's my priority, and